Okay, so we have done equations with distributing and combining and a mixture of the two things. This video is going to deal with solving these equations that have variables on both sides. So our first step is that we're still going to simplify both sides if needed. I mean, sometimes you won't need to, sometimes it might just be one, sometimes it might be both. But either way, you're looking at each side of the equation and deciding if you need to distribute and combine any like terms. Remember, at this point of things, there's no inverse operations because you're just dealing with one side of your equation. After that, we need to get those variables to the same side. Our job is to get x or whatever variable we're solving for by itself. And if it's on both sides, that's kind of impossible. So we need to get them to the same side. And we can't just take the two things. If I'm looking at example one, I can't just take that 4x and 8x and say, hey, I have 12x's. It doesn't work that way. So I have to move them to the same side. And I'm going to do that by adding or subtracting that entire term to move it to the other side. And it really doesn't matter which way you do it. And I'll show you both ways and prove that it really doesn't matter. Okay, but we're going to essentially still make it 0. Okay, whenever we deal with constants, we say make it 0. It's the same thing. If we're trying to move that whole variable term, we're trying to make it 0. Okay, and then you're just going to kind of keep on solving the equation that remains. It should pretty much look like a two-step equation after that, so not too bad. Okay, so the first one is 4x minus 8 equals 8x plus 12. I'm going to draw my line down the middle. And we need to get these 4x's over here with the 8x's or get our 8x's over here with the 4x's. Your choice. I like to look at it and say, what's going to keep my variables positive? So if I want to move that 4x, I would need to subtract it because 4x minus 4x is 0. And I can then remove it from that left-hand side of the equation. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. And now over there, I have 8x minus 4x, and I still have 4x's on the right. And I'm going to still bring everything else down. So I have a negative 8 on the left, keep that sign with it, and bring down that plus 12. And now it's a two-step equation. Okay, so my x's are on my right-hand side. I need to get rid of that 12 next. So I'm going to subtract 12 to make that 0. We get negative 20 equals 4x. And now in this last step, we do have that multiplication that we need to get rid of by doing the opposite and dividing. And we should get that x equals negative 5. Okay. I said I would prove that both ways work. Okay, if you want to write this down, go for it. But this little section, you do not have to write down if you don't want to. But I'm just going to rewrite my equation. 4x minus 8 equals 8x plus 12. And in this way of doing it, I'm going to get those 8x's over to the left side. So if I have a positive 8x, I'm going to subtract 8x to make it 0. I'm going to do it over here. Okay, and what ends up happening is we get a negative 4x minus 8 equal to a positive 12. So it should look familiar, just kind of everything has opposite signs. Now I'm going to get rid of that minus 8 by adding 8. So negative 4x equals 20. And then final step, get rid of that multiply by negative 4 by dividing both sides by negative 4. And x still equals negative 5. Okay, so if you want to say, hey, I always want to get my variable to the left-hand side, you go for it. Okay, if you want to kind of play around with the terms like I do and say, what am I going to do to keep my variables positive? That's also an option. So it's whatever you like. Okay, we're going to jump to number 2. Number 2 does have a little simplifying that we need to do. I'm looking at that left side. I see a negative 5 multiplied by some parentheses. So we are going to distribute first. So negative 5 times 3y is negative 15y. Negative 5 times a 7 is negative 35. And then I'm bringing down my other side. And now it kind of looks like the one above. I'm going to get my y's to the same side. I'm looking this and saying I would like to take those negative 15y's on the left and move them over to the right. And when it's a negative term, I'm going to add those 15y's because negative 15y plus 15y is 0. And I'm going to add the 15y's over here. Notice I'm writing it under the y's I already have. It doesn't make sense to write it under the 10 because I can't put those together. Okay, I like to kind of line things up vertically. So I have negative 35 equals 20y plus 10. My variables are on the right-hand side, so I'm going to get rid of those numbers. And the next thing is to subtract that 10. So negative 45 equals 20y. And final step, divide by 20. Okay, and we probably tell that 20 does not go into negative 45 evenly, but I can leave it as a fraction. I just have to make sure I'm simplifying things. So both of those numbers can be divisible by 5. And so we end up with negative 9 fourths as our answer. If you used your calculator, okay, you would also get negative 2.25, which is acceptable. But remember, fractions are totally fine. Okay, and the last one, I know it's a little bit of a doozy, but let's get through this. Okay, we got some fractions we got to deal with, but we're still going to make sure we're simplifying, combining anything we need, and then moving your x's to the same side so that we can get them alone on one end. Okay, so we have 2/3 multiplied by some parentheses. Okay, remember that this is really like 4/1. And if you're having trouble doing it kind of as it is, feel free to write it on the side of your paper. That's totally fine. What's happening is we're doing 2/3 times 4/1. Okay, and there's nothing to cross reduce. So this just ends up being an 8/3 x. And we also have a 2/3 times a negative 1/2. And we do have some things to cross reduce there. Our 2's can reduce into 1's. So over there, we get a negative 1/3. Okay, so it looks scary, but if you kind of just write it on the side, it shouldn't be too bad. And I'm going to bring down my negative 3/4 because I'm going to have a little bit more to do on that side. As I look at the other side, the right-hand side, this one's not so bad. I have a 5x and a 2x that I can combine together. So that side just simplifies to 7x minus 9. So that side is good. Okay, but on the left, I do have 2 constants that I can put together. So I do need to make those into some common denominators. So just on the side, once again, I'm going to like separate my scrap work over here. I have negative 1/3 and a minus 3/4. Notice no inverse operations. They're on the same side. We're just combining them together. They both happen to be negative. Okay, their common denominator is going to be 12. So this first one would be times 4 and times 4. So that's a negative 4/12. And the second one is times 3 and times 3. So that's a negative 9/12. So together, same sign. We add them, keep the same sign. Should be negative 13/12. Okay, so 8/3 x minus 13/12 equals 7x minus 9. Okay. Now I need to get my variables to the same side. Okay, let's think this through. 8/3 is like 3 1/3 x. Sorry, I lied. 2 2/3 x. Okay, we have 7x. So I'm going to move this over here. So put it over there. But 7x minus 8/3 x, we need to make them have a common denominator. But 7 is not bad. If we want it to be thirds, that's just going to be 21/3. Okay, and now I can subtract. And that ends up being 13/3 x. Let me bring down everything else. We're almost done. We have to add our 9 to get rid of it from the right side and put it over here. Okay, but once again, common denominator. Oh boy. Okay, we need to turn it into 12ths. And that is going to be 108, 108/12. Just verify. Yes, 108/12. Okay, and this is why calculators are okay. Now from here, the signs are different. So we subtract, take the sign of the bigger number. So that's going to give us 95 because that's 108 minus 13. So a positive 95/12. We still have our 13/3 x over there. And we have one last step. And that's to get rid of that fraction coefficient. Okay, by multiplying by its reciprocal. So we're going to multiply by 3/13. Cross reducing is your friend. So 3 becomes a 1 if we divide it by 3, and this becomes a 4. Okay, 12 divided by 3. Okay, we get x alone. And then now we can just multiply across. And we end up with, I'm going to squish it in there, 95 over 52. And that is our answer. So am I going to make you do tons like that? No. Okay, but you do need to know how to deal with these fractions. They are going to show up on the state test, unfortunately. So we're just going to keep going, keep practicing them, and hopefully get super good at them.